Welcome back to the Empire Builders podcast. I'm Dave Young, and I'm with Stephen Semple, and we talked about Barbie and Matchbox and Hot Wheels, and I don't know how we could go on without bringing up that other 1960s era doll toy. I'm going to call it a doll.
Oh my
Uh,
God. How
I
dare you?
know. Because that's what the word action figure didn't, I don't think it existed when G.I. Joe was first released. I don't know what they called. Maybe
No,
they called it action figure.
we're
That
going to
became a term
reveal
that you
that.
used because boys don't play with dolls, right? But somebody looked at all the Barbie dolls being snapped up and said, "What are we going to get for these little boys to convince them that heading off to Vietnam is a good idea?"
Well, even even in the Barbie, when we were talking about Barbie, you even at that point talked about G.I.
Oh
Joe.
yeah, yeah. I had some GI Joes. I was not a fan. I just wasn't. I had some,
Yeah.
but it just wasn't me. All right, so let's hear the story of GI Joe.
So G.I. Joe is a Hasbro product, and Hasbro was founded, now it was founded under a different name, but the company was founded on December 6th, 1923 by Henry Heil and Herman Hassenfield in Providence, Rhode Island. And they originally started selling textile remnants. And then they
Okay,
started to make pencil cases and school supplies. Then they moved into modeling clay and they made doctor and nurse kits as toys.
okay,
By 1942, they were primarily a toy company, and in 1968, they shortened the name to Hasbro, which is basically short form for Hassenfeld Brothers,
sure,
Hasbro.
yeah.
And today, they're one of the biggest toy companies around, with
Hmm.
over 5 billion in sales. Going back to the beginning, the move into the toy business was really driven by the son Merrill. So in World War II, the company gets involved in plastics, and this gives Merrill an idea for a hit toy. And it's 1952, and he comes across this idea that was developed by George Lerner, and it's these plastic pieces that you can use to form a face that you put on vegetables.
Oh, okay.
So Merrill takes this idea to his father, and they buy the rights for 7K, and they make the toy affordable. It's made from plastic, has no head. The head is a vegetable. It's priced at $1. And what do we think it's
Mister
called?
Mister Potato Head.
Mr. Potato Head.
I had one of those. Those were great.
Yeah, so that was their first big toy.
You know where my brain goes with all this, right?
Yeah.
When you start talking about they got into plastics, I it just immediately took me to the scene from The Graduate. Remember that? Dustin Hoffman. He doesn't know what to do with his life, and he's standing around his parents like they have a cocktail party or something. And this guy takes him aside and says, one word, plastics. He's like telling him to get into plastics. Like that's it's the equivalent of a gold rush in the toy business, right? Learn about plastics.
As we know, Mr. Potato Head was a huge hit,
Oh,
right?
and this was before, yeah. I think a lot of people don't remember that you didn't get the plastic potato.
No, you would just get the pieces.
You had to get a potato from mom.
Yeah. Or a carrot or,
Mm-hmm.
a beet or
Yeah.
something like that. But it also is what made it affordable because they could price this thing at $1. But like so many of these stories, it was met with resistance by the store because food as a toy is a bad idea. Because remember, the parents had come through food
The
rationing in the
depression. Yeah.
war, the
Yeah.
depression, so they didn't want food as a toy. So what does Merrill decide to do? Market directly to children.
Uh-huh.
And he sees this new media, TV, that kids are watching. And so he places an ad for the toy on television. And Hasbro, in fact, is the first company to advertise a toy on TV.
Okay.
And it totally works. Kids ask for it to be bought. So many advertisers also get stuck on this whole thing of, well, I have to advertise to the customer and the customer is the parent. No, you advertise to the kids and the kids will ask for it and the parent will buy
Yeah.
it.
Yeah.
But this is a game changer. They're the first to do that. And they make $4 million in the first year. Huge. It's making more than the original pencil business.
Wow. That's great.
But Merrill's looking and he still needs more. He wants another line. So there's this movie that has come out, The Absent-Minded Professor. Remember in the movie there
Oh,
was this
yeah,
invention
yeah.
called flubber? Remember flubber in the
Jerry
movie?
Lewis. Yeah.
Yeah. But the movie's so popular, a sequel comes out, The Son of Flubber.
Okay.
And Merrill buys the rights to create a toy version of Flubber.
A flubber. All right.
It totally bombs. There's a real problem with the product. There's reports of lots of rashes, people getting sick. So within months they have to pull it. They even have
Uh-huh.
a hard time disposing of it. And there's a rumor out there. You're gonna love this, Dave.
Made with lead paint.
There's a rumor out there that is buried under one of the parking lots at Hasbro.
All the flubber. That's great. We've been looking for Jimmy Hoffa. We should have been looking for flubber.
We should be looking for flubber. I know this will be on your mind now for a long time. So they literally lose like $5 million on the whole flubber thing. So they need a way out and fast. It's 1963 and they're desperate for an idea. And Merrill comes across this idea created by Stan Weston. And it's the first movable toy soldier.
Okay, yeah.
But it's not going to be called a doll. Boys don't play with dolls.
No, boys don't play with dolls. But did this follow the first movable Barbie doll, Ken doll? Is that about the time that they became movable parts?
It was around the same idea, but developed separately.
Okay.
This is where Merrill was brilliant. He recognized that there was going to be big resistance to this if it was called a doll, and he wouldn't let it be called a doll. He created the term action figure.
Stay tuned. We're going to wrap up this story and tell you how to apply this lesson to your business right after this.
Nice one.
Thanks.
We should do this more often, man.
I wish we could.
And why can't we?
It's my business.
What about it? Thought everything was good.
It was.
Do I hear a but in there?
Sales have started to flatten, and we're down over last year.
Oh.
Can't figure it out. Tried a bunch of stuff. Putting in more time doesn't seem to make a difference.
Yikes.
It's frustrating.
Have you spoken to Stephen?
Who?
The host from the podcast we just interrupted?
No.
Why not? I thought you were trying stuff.
I am, but what's Steven gonna do?
He'll work with you for free.
You mean that starter session thing?
Yep.
I don't know.
What do you have to lose?
Not much, I guess.
So, you gonna book one?
Yeah, why not? Where do I do it again?
I think you can do it right from this podcast.
Cool, thanks.
You bet.
We really should do this more often.
Golf more or interrupt this podcast?
Over to you, Dave.
Book your starter session on this podcast's website. Just visit theempirebuilderspodcast.com and click on Get Started. Let's pick up our story where we left off, and trust me, you haven't missed a thing.
He created the term action figure.
Okay, so it did. It came right hand in hand with G.I. Joe.
It's like so many things when there's this resistance, rename it, reframe it, change it, romanticize it, whatever it is you need to do. Don't educate people on, well, no, it's not adult. Just don't call it that. Call it something different. So he coined the term action figure. Now, no one liked the idea, but he forged ahead anyway, because again, what he liked with it was the life, the accessories, all the things you could do with it. And look, and he saw that in Barbie.
You model a toy after military spending, right? All you have to do is make a weapon that the Army doesn't have, and they'll buy that now, right? So you sell a kid a G.I. Joe, and now every accessory you make just contributes to the arms race.
In the 1960s, members of the military were heroes. It wasn't that like your dad, like your dad at that point, or your uncle or whatnot, served in Europe defeating Adolf Hitler.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So there was also all of that. And they came up with the name G.I. Joe from a 1945 film called The Story of G.I. Joe. That's how they created the name G.I. Joe. But what they want to do is make sure G.I. Joe was not mistaken for Ken. So they put a scar on his face.
I remember the scar. Yeah.
Right? Which made him tough and all that other stuff. And he articulated in over 21 places. So it was really quite an innovative toy.
Oh, yeah. They had like buttons on him. Like he had the Kung Fu grip. He had.
Well, those all came later. Yeah.
Yeah.
But even the first one, like the wrist, like there was all sorts of articulation. So it really was an innovative toy. So it's 1964. They've started to produce the toy. They're ready for the launch debut at the world's biggest toy store. And the night before, they suddenly discover they've got a problem. Hasbro's got a problem. They've been talking to Stan Weston, but they never finalized who owns the right. Stan Weston still owns the rights to G.I. Joe.
Okay.
So Merrill and Stan need to sit down and negotiate it. So, man, could you imagine being in that negotiation where you've all of a sudden you've developed all these toys, you've made all these toys, you're going to be launching it tomorrow, and you suddenly discover, holy crap, I don't have the rights, this other guy does. So they sit down, Merrill offers Stan $100,000 straight up for the rights, and Stan takes the money.
Poor Stan.
The initial orders were slow. It didn't actually, G.I. Joe did not sell well at first. So the jumpstart sales, here's what Merrill does. Merrill gets his reps to go to every Woolworths and buy up all the inventory. Just keep going back and buying, going back and buying. Woolworths thinks that they've got a hit.
Oh my gosh.
So what they do is they then do a follow-up large order. Hasbro tells the world that it's a hit and that Woolworths is buying more, and the rest is history.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic.
They end up selling 16 million units in the first year.
Create scarcity by manufacturing it.
Ever gone to an auction?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Here's the thing that always amazes me. An auctioneer will go, do I have a bid for $1,000? And there's no one. Do I have a bid for $700? Do I have a bid at $500? Do I have a bid at $250? And suddenly somebody bids at $250. No one was willing to pay $1,000, and then suddenly the thing bid at $250, and then it sells for $1,500. And you go, wait a minute. Are you freaking like what? We see this all the time.
My whole point is anybody that thinks this world of toys and marketing and advertising appeals to the rational mind, and that the rational mind is actually a thing, you're wrong. It's proven over and over again, right? I mean, a thing should have a value. That's rational thought. It doesn't.
Right.
It doesn't. Yeah.
Well, and as I said, my favorite example, and I always love watching auctions for that reason. So, so they sell 16 million units in the first year, but then a problem happens. Along comes the 1960s and the Vietnam War, especially 1968, which is the deadliest years. And G.I. Joe sales fall so fast during that, they have to halt production. Here's where Merrill, again, he's brilliant at reframing. So remember, he reframed it from a doll to an action figure. So now what does he do? G.I. Joe is no longer a soldier. He becomes an explorer. So they rebrand G.I. Joe as an explorer. It's not as big a hit, but it's still selling.
Keeps it alive. Sure.
Keeps it alive. Along comes the 1970s, and because of a whole pile of things going on with the oil industry and the cost of plastics, the sales of the 12-inch figure fall because it gets really expensive. So they make an 8-inch figure. And that doesn't work out so well. And then Star Wars comes along with their action figures that are 3 3/4 inch. And they're completely out of sync with Star Wars. Because as we know, what do kids do? It's not like all my G.I. Joe things I play with and I don't. No, you cross play with stuff.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're out of sync with the market, and that creates problems. Now, Merrill passes away, and his son Stephen takes over, and he decides to bring back G.I. Joe. Because guess what? He sees an opportunity. Because there's this conflict going on with Russia, with the Soviet Russia, with communist Russia, and American patriotism is on a rise. He reintroduces G.I. Joe, the great American hero, fighting this made-up enemy, right?
Which there's also an action figure for.
Right, and it's a runaway success. So when you look at G.I. Joe, what's really incredible is all the reframing that they did. Not a doll, action figure. Not a soldier, an explorer. Now fighting this unseen enemy. When I looked at it, they went through actually so many reinventions and iterations. I just thought it was a really incredible story. Again, what I really like is they were willing to make these little pivots and repackaging and reframing. And really it's just about reframe.
The fact that they were able to reframe is a tribute to they didn't completely get blinded by the blinders that they put on themselves when they named it G.I. Joe.
Yes.
That's a big risk in a lot of product things is when you, a good example would be like a plumber or some company that's a local company that wants to grow and be bigger, but they've named themselves the 6th Street Plumbers,
Right.
right? It's like,
Yeah.
okay, well, now you want to go to another town? Are you going to try to find a storefront on 6th Street?
Right.
So be bigger than that. Get something that's a little flexible to be bigger than that.
But in fairness, I think when you're in the time when G.I. Joe was launched, I think it would have been very hard to picture a day where the military was not going to be deeply respected and
Boy,
aspirational.
point well
Right.
taken. Yeah, absolutely.
Like, in fairness, I think that was a hard one to see coming.
And they're riding that wave, right? That's okay.
And they're riding that wave. When sales really fell and they had to halt production, they didn't go, well, we're done with G.I. Joe. They did step back and go, well, what can we do? This is the problem. What can we do differently? Well, let's reframe it this way. And while it didn't hit the same sales, it still had a success.
Yeah, back when there were still things to explore.
Well, exactly, right. Great point. Great point.
Are we going to do more episodes where we play with dolls?
Well, maybe.
Oh, I'm sorry, action figures?
No, action figures.
Action figures. Oh, thank you, Stephen. I've enjoyed learning about all these toys. It's a fun topic. Thanks for bringing it to us.
All right, thanks, David.
Thanks for listening to the podcast. Please share us, subscribe on your favorite podcast app, and leave us a big, fat, juicy 5-star rating and review. And if you have any questions about this or any other podcast episode, email to questions@theempirebuilderspodcast.com.